Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is Professor Sistrunk and I'm reaching out to my Cisco students. Okay, so you just completed your first chapter. You're about to end your first week. Woohoo! I have 100% of compliance, meaning everybody was able to log in to the course and also log into their lab area and be able to create labs and packages. Now, make sure you completed your discussion question. That's primo, that's important. Make sure you did that. But also make sure that you're on top of your work. Remember, in order to be a good network administrator, you're gonna have to do the same thing that Michael Jordan did. Practice, practice, practice. That's it. It's no magic bullet. It's just practicing. Of course, you have to remember your commands, but it's just practice. You continue to practice. So what I'm about to do in this lesson is begin to walk through the chapters. Now, we're going to start out with many different things. We're going to walk through using PowerPoints. We're going to walk through using live events. We're going to walk through using graphics. But I'm going to present to you a better way of understanding how to network. But it's basically going to come down to the core of everything. You have to sit back and you have to practice. And that's what it's going to always end up to. The best networking people in the industry just simply practice the trade. That's what it is. They utilize the tools on their tool belt to practice the trade. And your first tools is simply understanding the commands. And that's what you have to do. So with that being said, let's get started. Okay, so this particular section of the class will deal with lessons 1 and 2. I want to go over some stuff in lesson 1, but I also want to take us into lesson 2 so we can go ahead and move forward. Now remember, I told you earlier, all of these lessons will be placed in your discussion question. So when you open up this discussion question for next week, it will be this lesson in there. And at the end of this, it will always be 3 questions you will have to answer. But remember, I'm going to email you the link to it so you can be prepped and ready before class. Yes, ready before class. So make sure you look for that link and try your best to review the material ahead of time, because I'm going to ask you a lot of questions. Anyway, so our lessons in our class will be digging into the nitty-gritty of configuring a router. So here's your first question here. Do you have your basic configuration together? Let's go about looking at the basic configuration. In here, you're just going to get the basic switch settings together. That's important. You should be able to lock that in your brain because you will use that all the time. Maybe depending on what industry you work in, because remember I told you in the classroom, we work as teams in the networking community. So if I'm working for a company, it's a team of network administrators and network engineers that come together to do the work. So you got network technicians, network administrators, network engineers. They come together and configure the routers and switches. It's not just a one-man job. Unless you're in a mom and pop shop, of course it's a one-man job. But we got to look at ports. Most importantly, when it comes to ports, we got to secure these ports. You have to create a secure remote access to these switches. Like I told you in the classroom, you don't really want to be in China trying to configure a router or a switch in Chicago. So you don't, I got to jump on a plane, go back home. No, you want to be able to sit down at a table with a cup of coffee. As you can see, I got my coffee. With a cup of coffee and begin to do your configuration anywhere. And then we're going to talk about the basic router configuration. Okay? I told you we have to make sure we understand our basic troubleshooting commands. So we're going to verify everything is connected. Let's move on. Okay. So in this first part, we want to deal with configuring a switch. I will be asking you questions in our class about your basic configuration. And one or two of you, I am going to pull out and say, do your basic configuration on this router or switch for me. Okay? So get prepared. You don't know who it's going to be, but it's coming to a theater near you. Okay, moving on. So to make this more interesting, I'm going to have a little fun with it too. So as you can see, you must be able to simply use a console cable to connect to a switch or a router. Okay? Now, like I said earlier, the people who really engage in this a lot will be the network technicians, because they may have to do a basic configuration. But the network administrators, the network engineers, they oversee in the whole process, you know, and they rarely would actually go configure, set up a console cable and go in there and do some troubleshooting. Now I know it's a lot gonna argue with me. I do it every day, but really, you have the network technicians, because these are individuals that's moving up through the ranks, actually doing this. But you overseeing the process. Every process is watched. Okay, so you just got to remember that you have to set up your switch virtual interface, and you're gonna hit called SVI. We just say connect the console cable, but you're gonna set this up to be able to configure a remote setup. So let's go ahead and show you how I would do that in the real world. Okay, let's go ahead and look at it. Okay, now as you can see, I pulled up Packet Tracer. So what I'm going to do here is create a mini network. There's something basic to be able to show. So I'm going to come here and grab a switch. And it really, at this point, I'm going to always grab the 2900 switches, because mostly those particular switches we work with at this level. But we also will explore, and here's a 2900, but we also will explore these switches here, which is the 3500 series. Remember, these are a series of switches that are produced by Cisco. Cisco create these switches, and they may say 3560, 3530, whatever, but it's a series. So we always lead with the 3500s. Okay, and each switch has some special work to it, but I'm not going to use this right here. Okay, but I will be using this particular switch here. Okay, so now I'm gonna go down here and grab some end devices. Now you know that we need computers, and I'm just doing a basic setup. I need to cable it up, so I'm gonna go over here. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and grab a console cable and connect it. Okay, we already showed you how to connect that, and I'm gonna connect it to the switch by connecting to the console port. But I'm also gonna cable it up all the way. I'm gonna go ahead and put my copper straight through cable in. Of course, I'm gonna go right here, and then I'm gonna connect this to the switch. I'm gonna use Fast Ethernet 1. I could use Fast Ethernet or Giga Ethernet, but I'm gonna go Fast Ethernet right quick. And then I'm gonna go right here and try grab 2 and drop it down here. Now this system here, what you see in this connection, remember, this is strategically put together in organizations. It looks like I'm just throwing things to connecting them together, but really in organizations, they have a strategic plan when they connecting the ports. Okay, now I'm gonna fast start my systems by doing that, so I can have all green arrows. You must understand that switches out of the box, you can put them in a production network and they will automatically start working. But we do not want to do that. We always want to configure our switches. Okay, now you see the basic setup. You already know how to do this. So let's go back to the slides and proceed on. Okay, we're back now. So you just saw the basic setup. You already know how to do it. I know you got that locked down. So let me proceed on. So here's our basic configuration. Now, remember this. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. First of all, you're going to work with a team of individuals who will have this already put together. All you have to do is follow the protocols that team set up. And as you proceed through the ranks, you may be one of the senior members who actually begin to set this up. But you have to make sure you get your basic configuration together. Okay, so now you're going to begin to enter global configuration mode. You should know your different modes by typing in configure terminal. You're going to also start configuring the interface. Now we're going to put VLAN 99 in there. But we know, we talked about this in class, we do not use VLAN 99, and we immediately take everything off of VLAN 1 because we know that everybody in the universe know those commands and they will hack your system. Then we're going to put on an IP address, and we will do IPv6 and IPv4. We're going to say no shutdown. No shutdown turns that particular port on. And then we're going to end, and we always going to do copy run configuration because we want to make sure that we save our configuration. You already know this, okay? Let us go back to the switch and begin to configure this switch, okay? Okay, we're back. So let's go ahead and log into the switch. Okay, so I'm gonna go to my desktop, of course. Now, there's many ways you can log in, but I'm gonna start off doing it this way only because I want to make sure that you understand how to do this. We're gonna have our configuration set up correctly, and we can see that the switch is ready to go. So let's go ahead and type in a few commands. So I want to enable, and from enable I want to go config T. Okay, so I want to now enter in VLAN 99. I'm gonna put this in here, but you know in the real world it do not happen like that. So I'm gonna go ahead and type in. Now you're gonna see me typing some short versions of commands and some long versions. I just want you to make sure, start out typing the entire command out. But if you're comfortable with doing the shortcuts, do the shortcuts, but make sure you know the command straight out. Now I'm gonna go with IP address because I want to give this switch an address real quick, and I'm gonna say 172.17.99.11. So we really wouldn't use that, and then we're just gonna say 255.255.255.0. Now I could put it in there real simple and quick, but I'm doing this long version so you can begin to say, oh, this is what I need to do, Professor. This is what I need to do. Everything went well, so I just configured that port, and I gave that port an IP address. Now when I say port, remember this is a virtual setup here because this is what's going to allow you to remote into it. And I tend to say port because people understand that they configuring something physical. But in reality, in this particular situation, we creating a virtual setup to be able to route into the switch. Okay, let's move forward. So we're gonna say no shutdown. If you do not do this, no shutdown, you did not configure the switch. Okay, and we're gonna say end, so that I did all of the configurations the way it should have been done. Okay, you're gonna make mistakes, you can come back and fix it, but don't worry about it. But just know in the real world, your IPv4 addresses, your IPv6 addresses, you'll get that from your manager, so they will work with no problem. Okay, now let's go back to the slide. We have this configured. Okay, we're back. So now you saw me type in these commands, but this is the beginning of your basic configuration. So what we want to do is move to the next screen. Now I know I know you're going to say, well, Professor, you didn't put in copy running configuration, startup configuration. It's in there. I'm just moving a little fast in the video, but it's in there. So remember, to be able to manage this switch remotely, you have to have a default gateway in there. So as you can see right here, the switch should be configured with a default gateway if you want to manage it remotely. And that's the reason we do the basic configuration in, and now we're going to throw in the default gateway so we can tap into this switch and do it from anywhere in the world. Okay, let's go. We're back. Here we go now. Let's go ahead and put our commands in there. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say we already where we should be, but let's go ahead and go to command terminal. Okay, so we're going to IP default. Now it's a way to put this in really fast, but I'm not going to show you those commands quite yet, but as we get to the end of the semester, I'll start showing you how to do it quickly. And I know some of you are going to say, well, Professor, I already know, which is okay. It's okay, but I don't want to start you off with bad habits until you first learn the good habits. I want you to learn how to correct yourself before we start showing you these shortcut ways, because some people, they try to do the shortcut ways really fast, but they don't learn what we call the correct way to do this. Remember, we have a procedural way to do things, and then we just have shortcut ways to do it. And neither one of them are bad as long as you know the procedure way. The procedure way will get you out of trouble every time. Okay, so we got that command in there, and plus I'm gonna scroll up because I'm just gonna throw in that copy run configuration again, startup configuration, to get that loaded in. So that's loaded in. Let's go back to the slide. Now I'm gonna move faster, but I just wanted to start this off to show you that we're configuring the switch right now. Okay, let's go back. Okay, we're back. Now we're about to configure ports, the switch ports. We're not going to do all of them. We're just going to do maybe 1 or 2 configurations, because in this lesson is have multiple configurations. And you already did this, so we're just making sure we're following up to make sure you get it down. I am going to go in here and create a situation where I throw another switch in here. Remember, I already got a switch in there and built out, but let's go ahead and throw another switch in here. Okay, so I went ahead and built it out right now. So we have 2 switches in here with 2 computers, and this is our mini network, okay? But this is how you begin to practice. You build it in Packet Tracer and you start practicing to get your skill sets together. Let's go ahead on this particular switch and set up that port. So I'm gonna come right here, click back right here and go to desktop, and of course I'm gonna go to the terminal and access that switch. Okay, now let me see if this is the new switch, the old switch. Let's see what we got here. Okay, so we back here and we see all these line connections. Make sure you look at the connections. Remember, I said the moment you put us connected to your network, it will automatically start working. But we do not want to do that. We want to configure that switch. You never want to put a switch that is not configured in a production or enterprise environment, because boy, can it be a lot of problems. You can't even imagine the problems you will have. So let's go ahead and configure this. I'm going to, of course, go to Command Console, and you see me using my short version. Then I'm going to go Interface. Okay, I'm going to do Interface, Fast Ethernet. Now, this is because I'm using that port Fast Ethernet. Let's see if it'll work if I got the right port, because it should be the right one, but you never know. Sometimes you choose the wrong one. So I'm going to say 0/1, enter. It worked. I have the right port. And then I'm going to say end. And with that, of course, I'm going to come back to copy configuration to copy that configuration in. So you see me copying my run configuration, starter configuration every time I do a particular project. Every time I do something in here, I want to say that configuration. Okay, so let's go back to the slides to finish this up. You can see that this is simple stuff, simple things that you are doing. There's no magic bullet. It's just putting in the work, sitting down, typing in your configuration, and setting up the switch or the router. Same thing. Moving on. Okay, now here's your show commands. I am going to test you on your show commands when we get in class. Remember, your show commands are basically commands that tells you or help you figure out a problem. You know, you get to look at the switch, you get to look at the router, and then you get to troubleshoot using your show commands to figure out what the problem may be. Now, of course, we have to go in here and secure the router. I'm not going to make this video too long, but it's going to be long. But anyway, we have to go in here and secure the router. And you see secure remote access. Let's go ahead and look at that. We will use SSH. In every configuration, when you secure in the router or you remote into the router, you want to have a secure platform to go into there. So you want to make sure you use SSH. But the important thing about SSH, you want to know that it's secure shell. You also want to know that it's TCP. The protocol is TCP, and you want to know the port number. Now, I'm not going to talk about that other one that I told you never to use because I don't want to put that on in this video. But it's one out there, and I'm going to ask you when we get back to class to see if you remember what remote access we do not use. Okay, you get that point. I'm gonna move on. Okay, basic router configuration. So we did the switch configuration. We're not gonna do the router configuration, but we're gonna talk about it. Cisco routers and Cisco switches have many similarities. Remember, I told you in class, they basically the same configuration. It's just when the routers, when you get to going to the level of using protocols to routing protocols, that's what we call them, routing protocols, then that's when you're doing something different on the router. But setting it up from the beginning is basically the same. Let's move on. Okay, so I just put this here so you can see it. This is a basic routing configuration. Okay, and you can see it laid out. Now, here's the different interfaces. You got, the important thing about these interfaces, you got Giga Ethernet 000, 001 and 000. Now, the difference between the Giga Ethernet is you have a serial connection. I'm not going to do that here because we're going to have a chance to do that through the class. But right now, I want you to know these are ports that you are configuring on the router. You're giving it IP addresses, you're giving it a description, and you're making sure that it's turned on. Okay, now we talked about the loopback, and basically we just had a discussion about the loopback is something that we do experimental within the classroom. There's other reasons to use the loopback, but for now in our classes, we just gonna use it for experimental purposes. One of the things we will use it for just a minute, like we going on the internet. So we'll use a loopback address to pretend like we going outside on the internet. But right now we're not gonna do that here. Okay, moving on. So that ends the first session of this class. Now we're going to go into chapter 2. So let's go back and take a look at the configuration that we set up. Okay, students, let's make sure we understand. We created a basic network. We started off with one switch that we configured, and then we threw another switch in there that we have not configured at this time. If we take a look at the configuration of this switch, everything should be done properly. So let's just use a command to see how this particular switch looks. So I'm gonna open it up and I'm gonna say show run, showing the running configuration, because remember we copied it, and we can see in this particular switch that we made some real good changes to it. We didn't put passwords in and all that. We didn't even change the switch name, even though we can go and do that. We just basically did basic configurations in here, and you see an IP address right here. You see the default gateway address. So you will always check your configurations to make sure you save those particular configurations in. Remember, I told you that's one of the biggest mistakes. People forget to check their configurations. So we have this set up now. Let's go into chapter 2. Sometimes in this course, we're going to talk a lot about the theory side of the devices, the switches, and the routers. Understanding switch concepts is basically giving you an understanding of what the switch should be doing. You're going to have a practical understanding of things. That's when you're actually typing the commands in and doing the work. But you also will receive a lot of theory about things. So when we get to the theory part, I'm going to shout that out because sometimes students get bogged down in the theory, but they don't get bogged down in the practical application. The practical application is learn the commands, learn how to configure the router, learn how to troubleshoot the router. The theory, you will begin to understand it more and more when you're working in the industry. But right now, we need you to truly understand your commands, how to use the commands, and also how to troubleshoot the commands. So let's move forward. We're going to talk a little bit about frames and how to forward these frames. Okay, we also going to talk about switching domains. We want to avoid collisions. So we're going to talk a little bit about this. Now, the forwarding methods you have no control over. That is decided by the manufacturer or the senior network administrators who may want to change the forwarding path. They can do that, but basically the manufacturers decide how that switch will be forwarded. Moving right along. Forwarding frames. Now, I want you to pay particular importance to this because this will be on the certification, but it's the theory part of it. So once you get it down in here, you pretty much got it, you understand it. So it says 2 terms are associated with frame: entering and leaving an interface. Okay, so you got ingress and egress, frames coming in, frames going out. Remember, when we on the switch level in your first course, you learned that you're dealing with frames. Okay, you also have a table in here which is called the MAC table. Okay, now the MAC table is the table that allows the switch to reach out to every device that's connected to it, MAC address of the devices that's connected to it, so it can store it on this table. And the reason it does that is to make sure that it can send frames or forward frames to the proper place without causing collisions or having that particular problem. But when we're working with a switch, we no longer have to worry about collisions. The switch learns and forwards. So what the switch will do is learn every device, like I said earlier, and then send that frame that comes in out to the appropriate place it should go to. Tell me what a LAN is. In your mind, you thinking he wants me to talk about the switch. When I say tell me what a WAN is, in your mind you say he wants me to talk about the router. So associate those two together. So as that frame comes in, if it's not in the table, the switch says, okay, I have you now, I'm gonna add you to my max table. Okay, and it says forwards it out to the appropriate place. So if it already has you located on the MAC table, the switch will then send you out to the appropriate location because I have your address, your MAC address. Now we talk about store and forward switching and cut through switching. Now here's the theory because you do not actually see this. Yeah, some commands you can type in to change it, but these are the senior people that deals with that. For you on a basic level, store and forward switching receives the entire frame. So in a nutshell, it receives the entire frame, okay? And once it receives that frame, it reviews the frame to make sure it's okay, it's right, it's appropriate, and then it forwards it to the appropriate place. But cut through just receives a portion of that frame. Why do we use cut through? Because cut through actually allows us to move faster on our network. Remember, you got hundreds of thousands of frames shooting in and out of your network. Can you imagine? Even if you just had 10 people in the office constantly emailing and all that, it's a lot of things going on. And then you got in the background on the switch, things constantly talking to each other. Remember, the switch is alive. Once you put it in a production network, it is alive. So it's consistently functioning. So you want to make sure that you have a fast process to move these frames. So you hear a lot about cut through. Okay, but remember, this is theory. So let's do this right quick. Let's go take a look at a partial setup of this process. Okay, so one of the things about Packet Tracer is that you can actually see the activity that's going on in the background. So what I'm going to do now is I am going to come here, and this time I'm going to go to the command console, and I'm simply going to ping the other PC. I want to ping PC3. So I'm going to come over here to my command console and just simply type in ping. And it's going to be 192.168.1.10. If I did it right. Okay, it looks okay. Let's see what happens. And it was able to connect. But let's say I wanted to see how the frames are moving. So let's take this here, put it over to the side. And what I'm going to do now is go into simulation mode so I can actually see what's actually happening in the background. So we'll go ahead, since I'm in simulation mode, start simulation. And you can see now that devices are talking to each other. But watch what I do here though. I'm going to go ahead, and you're going to get a chance to use this a lot, and bring this up and do another reach out. I'm going to reach out again to the device, but you can see that it's in simulation mode. So it's actually sending that packet across to the next IP, and I'm going to bring this down so you can see it a little bit better. Let's go shoot this over. And I'm going to just drop it down here so we'll know we're looking at it. So you can see now that these frames are moving. So I'm going to clear the frames up right now. I'm going to filter these frames. So all I want is ARP. I don't want DNS. I don't want that. I don't want that. These are protocols. Now I want to come back here and I want to run that frame again. Okay. So as you can see right now, it's in status mode. It's saying, okay, I'm looking at the frame and I just stopped the process. So I'm gonna let the process go ahead and play out. Okay, just let it play out. Now, let me point out some things here. So I got ICMPs, that's me pinging device. It tells me where it's going. So I'm looking at this. Now, what do this got to do with stored and forward? And what do it has to do with cut through? We cannot see what protocol is being used on these particular frames, but there are commands, if I chose, that I can type in to move these frames along. So one of the commands that I can type in, and we're going to go back to the slides and I'm going to put those commands in. If I wanted to check if I was stored and forward or cut through, I can actually configure it, I can change it, and I want you to write these commands down because I want you to have them. Now, a true network administrator would not allow you to do this on the network. Remember, we're in an enterprise environment and you would not be allowed to go in there and look at this command to see or configure a particular switch to be stored and forward or cut through and all that. That just wouldn't happen in a real environment. But there are commands out there where you can actually go and do that. And also you can type in the show switching mode to see what it is. Now, but also know in different organizations they do different things. So, but we talk about enterprise networks. It's a chain of command, and we want to make sure you don't go do nothing foolish on the network. So let's move on. Okay, so now the reason I said this will be important because as you can see, this here is the frame right here, and it's showing you how the frame is set up. Know this here because this will be on the certification test. Trust and believe it. They would like to know how many bits are in here. They would like to know, do you know what's set up in this particular frame header? So just pretty much know it so you can actually work through it. It's got error checking in there. It's got buffing. Read through the material when it comes to storing forward. But just really know the basic of storing forward. It's going to take the entire packet in, scan the packet to make sure it's in an appropriate place, then send it forward into the system. Whereas cut through is just going to take a piece of the packet, review it, and say, okay, come on,